Hello my sweet bestie angels, welcome back. We have made it to the end of another month, so of course we are going to sit and yap about books once again. I feel like April was such an interesting reading month for me. I feel like it was like this for me. And so I'm excited to talk about what I read, but also like what even was this month. I don't even know. In terms of stats, I read 11 books in April. 5 of them were romances, 3 of them were fantasy, and 3 of them were dystopian books. And as for my monthly TBR, honestly, I did terribly this month. I had 7 books on my TBR, which is a little bit unusual for me. Usually I have 6, but for some reason I thought, hey, let's add another one. Don't know why I did that. I had 7 books on my TBR and I read 2 of them. Very unsuccessful in that regard, but that's okay. Some months we kill it, some months we don't, and I know exactly why it happened this month. Even when I was creating my April TBR, I literally said in that video, like, I don't know how many of these books I'm actually gonna get to because there are so many new releases coming out that I want to read. Like, so many of my anticipated releases were coming out in April that I wanted to focus on, so that is definitely where my energy went. And then I also fell into a slump, so that was a whole other thing, which we will get into. But let's talk about the 11 books that I read in April. The first book that I picked up and the first book that I finished was Emily Henry's new book, Great Big Beautiful Life. I was very, very blessed to get an early copy of this one, so I did get to read it at the very beginning of April. And this was honestly really special to me because Emily Henry is one of my favorite authors in the world. She comes out with one book every year and it is always pretty much like in the last week of April. And this year, because I got an early copy, I got to read this book on my birthday. I got to read a new book by one of my favorite authors on my birthday, which is at the very beginning of April. So this just felt like a little birthday gift to me, which I'm very, very thankful for. I'm a little bit nervous to talk about this because I just have seen so many reviews about this book since it was like officially released. And a lot of people are really disappointed or unhappy with this book. And everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Everyone is allowed to feel whatever they want to feel about a book, obviously. But I personally had a really good reading experience, so I'm gonna share my opinion. I've already shared this in a reading vlog, so it's not like it's going to come as a great surprise, but I really enjoyed this book. Is it my favorite Emily Henry book? No. Is it my least favorite Emily Henry book? No. It kind of sits somewhere in the middle for me personally. I rated it 4.5 stars. So for that to sit in the middle of my like ranking, my Emily Henry hierarchy, that is kind of crazy, but she just has so many 5 stars from me. So a 4.5 obviously falls a little bit further down the list. But overall, I had a really great time reading this. I feel like out of all of her books, this is one that has a bit more of a plot to it, a bit more of like a story to it. And to me, when I read the synopsis of that really excited me. If you don't know what this book is about, we are following Alice, who is a writer, and she is up against another writer called Hayden, and they are both competing for the role to write Margaret's story. And Margaret is this really famous lady who has lived an incredibly interesting life, a life in the limelight. She comes from a very wealthy, well-known family, and she basically lived as a socialite, I guess, for a lot of her life, and now she is really old. She lives in this tiny little small town island thing, and Alice and Henry are both fighting for the opportunity to be able to write her story and publish it. And for both Hayden and Alice, this would be a huge career milestone, and they are both living in this small town whilst they compete for this position, and they end up spending a lot of time together, and you can probably guess what happens. But it is really interesting because we have Alice's story that includes not only potentially a romance, obviously, but also just a lot of character development, a lot of just understanding who she is and what she wants from life. And then you're also following Margaret's story, and you're getting to know how she grew up and what her life looked like through these like flashback scenes, which was really, really interesting. I will say I did go into this book with the expectation that it was probably not going to be super romance heavy, and I'm glad that I went in with that expectation because I do think it was helpful to my reading experience. I knew that it was going to be just a lot more like fiction heavy compared to romance heavy. I will say I feel like Emily Henry has kind of always done that anyway. I feel like she's always balancing this fiction romance kind of scale, but I do feel like this one did kind of, I don't even want to say it felt so much more fiction heavy because I do feel like the romance was a significant part of this story, but I do think it was just a bit more of a subtle romance. It was more of a quiet love story. And I know some people didn't love that, but I personally do. I love a really quiet, subtle love story where it's about the brush of the hands, where it's about the eye contact, where it's about how they get to know each other and they can tell how the other person feels just by the way they stand or by the way their body language is. Like, I personally love that type of romance. And overall, I just love Emily Henry's writing. I love the way she creates such a vivid image in my brain. I could see this island in my head. I could see Margaret's house. I could see Margaret. I could see Hayden and Alice and the accommodation they were staying in as well. Like, every image in my brain was so clear, and I think that's because of Emily Henry's writing. Overall, like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars, and my only criticism is that I do wish it was a little bit longer so that we got a little bit more of Margaret's story and a little bit more of the romance story, because I feel like I felt a little bit unsatisfied by both of those storylines. I feel like because we had two such significant things happening, I wish the book was a little bit longer to be able to give them each the time that they deserve to be able to be as polished as they needed to be. To me, they didn't feel quite as polished as I wanted them. Obviously, personal opinion. I just got to the end and I was like, it just feels like the story shouldn't be over yet, or it feels like we should have dragged out that last like 50 to 100 pages a little bit longer. That's just like how I felt about it. So I felt like I couldn't give it 5 stars when I was left wanting a little bit more. But everything that we did get, I loved. But that is all I have to criticize. So that was my personal reading experience. I really enjoyed it, and honestly, like, yeah, she's done it again. It was great. Next, I picked up Bad Publicity by Bianca Gillam. I honestly really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it 4 stars. This book follows Andy, who is a publicist in the book industry, and she has been assigned the role to look after this guy called Jack. And it just so happens that they both have this history together. Kind of, it's very brief, honestly, the history that they do have, but it ended quite badly, and just the way things ended, like, Andy has held a grudge, so now she is assigned to be his publicist. He is an author and he is going on a book tour, and she has to go with him on this book tour, and so obviously it's like a forced proximity situation. And yeah, she's holding this grudge against him. She wants to do a good job at her job as a publicist, like she wants to be a good publicist, but this grudge is really getting in the way of her doing a good job at being his publicist because she's just so annoyed at him. But also you can tell that Jack is really trying to, I don't know, just like be nice and trying to like mend things, and she doesn't really want to. And over time, I guess she gets a bit softened and they are able to work things out. And when you find out like why she holds this grudge, I honestly thought it made sense. Like, I was kind of like, I would be really annoyed too if that was the situation. It does end up all like working out, obviously, and it's a romance book, you can assume what happens in the end. But I just really liked this. I did actually listen to this one as an audiobook, and I thought it was a great audiobook, so if you do enjoy audiobooks, I think this one could be a good one to add to your list. But it was just like a great rom-com with like a good amount of depth. Like, I really just didn't have any complaints, and I definitely recommend it. I honestly felt like it gave kind of that romance fiction kind of balance as well. I don't want to compare this book to Emily Henry because I wouldn't go that far, but it did kind of have that like fiction cross between romance kind of vibe to it, which I really like, because also our main character is going through a lot of grief and kind of processing the grief that she's been through, so that is also an element in that. And I feel like, yeah, it's a lot more than just a romance, but it also was a really good romance. Next we have Fearless by Lauren Roberts, the last installment of the Powerless trilogy. I know that there is one more novella coming at least. I don't know if there's anything else. I know it's at least one more novella, but this is the last like book in this series, and I did really enjoy this. I had a lot of fun with it. This is like a 500 or 600 page book, but it flew by to me. I was really intrigued to see what Lauren Roberts was going to do in this book because I just like didn't know how she was going to continue this series, but I really liked the direction that she took with it for the most part. The romance to me felt a little bit repetitive, which I mentioned in my reading vlog as well. I'll link the reading vlog down below if you want like my full thoughts, I guess. But I think because we had seen this like back and forth banter and this like flirtation between our two main characters for 2 books already, and then we were getting it again in the 3rd book, like it just didn't hit the same to me as it had in the 1st book, because I think I'd almost become like desensitized to it. Like, I just didn't care as much about the romance anymore because it was very predictable to know where it was going to end up. And I really didn't love what she did with one of the characters in the book. I just didn't love the ending that was chosen for them, but again, that's like a personal preference thing. I just wish they'd done something slightly different. Overall, I had a really good time. This series is just fun. It's just like quick and fast paced, and there's great banter and flirtation. So I ended up giving this 4 stars because again, I had a really great time. It wasn't perfect to me, but it was fun. So 4 stars for Fearless. Then I picked up The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings, another one of my most anticipated releases of the year, if not my most anticipated release of the year. This was an easy 5-star read for me. It was so good. I annotated the whole thing. I could not put it down while I was reading it, and once I did finish it, I could not stop thinking about it. The way Jessa Hastings writes is just incredible. There is no one who writes like Jessa Hastings does, and there is no one who just scratches the itch in my brain better than Jessa Hastings does when it comes to writing. I'm just like flicking through now, and even just like reading all of the things that I underlined, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this book was so good. This is one of those books that I could talk for like hours about because there's so many different facets of this book that I found so interesting. Obviously, like I've just mentioned, I have always loved Jess's writing, but I don't necessarily think there's ever been a character that she's written that I could personally relate to very much. I don't really see myself in Magnolia or Daisy or Daphne, but despite not finding those characters relatable, I've always just had this place in my heart for them. Like I really love those characters. So when I started this book and there were so many things about George's life that I could relate to, it was kind of spooky because I've always had like the writing but not the relatability. So to have the writing and the relatability was like a bit of a punch to the stomach, honestly, because seeing yourself represented on a page, and I know a lot of you have felt that with certain other books, whether it was this one or something completely different. When you see yourself represented on a page and see your thoughts said in a way that you've always thought them but maybe never said out loud, it is very spooky. And whilst there's a lot of Georgia that I can't relate to, a lot of her personality and a lot of her life that is not like mine, there were like a spooky amount of things that I was like, what the heck? Like, did Jessa get this from my journal? I'm a little bit spooked. I also just think Georgia as a person, I just loved her. I just thought she was fascinating. Just the way that she perceives people, I really, really loved. If you are an observant person and you like to analyze people, which you have to read this book. If you guys don't know, I have a behavioral science degree. So whilst I am not as qualified as Georgia is in this book, like she's studying her master's and doing I think a double degree. Anyway, she knows a lot more than I ever did, but just like seeing those small snippets, I don't know. It's like when you meet someone and you start talking to them and you find out that you have a shared interest in something, or like if you are super into a specific topic that you've read a lot about or listened to a lot of podcasts about or whatever, and then you meet someone who also has done that same thing and has a lot of interest in that same thing, you just automatically feel like attached to that person. You're like, oh my gosh, let's just like talk about this for ages. That's how I felt with Georgia with observation, analysis, psychology, behavioral stuff. Like I love, that is my bread and butter. I love that sort of stuff. So anyway, I feel like I just said a whole lot of words without saying anything at all, but I love this book. I wouldn't say I loved it for the romance, even though that was like the main part of this book. I did really enjoy the romance, but I think it was just the family dynamics and just like reading about George's life that I thought was just so fascinating and so interesting, and I just loved the way that she thought. And I think if you love the way a character thinks, you're gonna love a book. So definitely recommend this, and you don't have to read any of Jess's other writing before reading this. Easy 5-star. And unfortunately, after finishing that, I fell into the slumpiest of slumps because nothing sounded good. I could not stop thinking about The Conditions of Will, and picking up any other book it just felt like a chore. It didn't feel good, it didn't feel fun, and yeah, nothing sounded good to me, but I did keep reading. So the next few books that I picked up, I don't really feel like I gave them a fair chance because I wasn't really in the mood to read them, but I'm gonna tell you my thoughts on them anyway. So again, take these reviews with a grain of salt because I just don't think my heart was in it as much as it could have been if I wasn't slumping. I tried to rate the next few books with like a mindset of like, what would I rate this if I wasn't slumping? Because I know I would enjoy it more if I wasn't slumping. So I tried to rate them fairly still. I don't know if that really makes sense, but anyway. The next book that I picked up was The Rebel Witch, which is the second book in the Crimson Moth Heartless Hunter duology. This was my book club book of the month with my besties. We read the first book in this duology last year, and so it was really fun to be able to pick up the second book in a series because we've never done that in our book club before. We've always just read like standalones, or we've just like never continued a series if we have started one. So it was really fun to continue a series we had already started together, and I'm very excited to talk about it with them because we haven't met up to talk about it yet. I think I felt pretty similarly with this book as the first one. I love a duology. I think so many other series could benefit so much from being a duology because I feel like you can do a lot in 2 books, and I think this was just a great duology. It was fun, it was fast paced. I do think, again, this is one of those books where I'm like, if you just want like a fun time, read this series, because it's not extraordinary, it's not like the best thing I've ever picked up in my life in my opinion, but it's fun and the characters are witty, they have good banter, they are cunning, and they just like create good plans. And I really love a really smart, really cunning female main character, and this series has that. And there were definitely quite a few occasions where she had a plan and she made it work, and the rest of her like crew was like, what the heck, you didn't even tell us this was gonna happen. She's like, well, I just had to, you know, like do it. I had to do it myself, because if I told you, it wouldn't have worked out. So she was always like a few steps ahead, which I loved. And she's one of those main characters where like it would benefit her so much to not fall in love. Like her career as a witch, because she is a witch, she is the Crimson Moth, her career and her job would be so much easier if there was no romance, if she never fell in love. And so for her to fall in love, it's almost like an inconvenience, and it's almost like frustrating to her, which is just very entertaining to read about, because watching someone who like does not want to fall in love and almost like it happens to her rather than like with her or for her, it's just like kind of fun to see that be like a frustrating experience rather than something she like leans into. She's just a really cool female main character. I really, really liked her. If you want a new fantasy series to start or duology to start, definitely read this. It's just a good time. Again, I was slumping when I read this, so I do think my reading experience was hindered by that, but I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars because it feels like it deserves 4 stars from me. Would I have rated it higher if I wasn't in a slump? I don't know. It's so hard to tell, but I do think it is like a solid 4-star duology to me. I also decided to pick up Wild and Wrangled, which is another new release that came out this month. And this series to me is just like the perfect kind of palette cleansers. They're the perfect in-between books. They are quick, they are fun. They're just like good, solid romances. This is the 4th book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. And I think this is the final book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. So in this book, you're following Dusty and Camille, who do have a bit of a history together. They were together in high school. Camille comes from a really like, I don't know, like kind of like posh family. They're quite well off and wealthy and have like a certain reputation. And Dusty is just, I don't know, like normal, I guess. And Camille's family really does not want her to be with Dusty. Like they want her to be with someone who's very like wealthy and established and has a good family or whatever. And so there was already a lot against them when they were younger, but now they are much older. I want to say they're in their 30s. And the book starts at Camille's wedding, where she's marrying this guy that her parents are very happy for her to marry because he like ticks all of the boxes, but the wedding doesn't end up happening. And so we kind of see the fallout from this wedding just not happening, and we see why it didn't happen, and we just see Camille trying to like rebuild her life, even though she had planned for it to go a certain way, I guess, and it's just kind of gone the completely other way. And we get a lot of the characters from the first 3 books in the series, which I loved, and it was just, I don't know, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Again, I was slumping while I read it, so I probably could have enjoyed it more if I wasn't slumping, but I ended up giving it 4 stars because I just had a good time. Small town romances to me are kind of just like easy books. They're books that I pick up when I don't necessarily need like a 5-star read, but I just want to have something that's fun and familiar and easy, and this book ticked all of those boxes. But again, all I was thinking about while I was reading it was the conditions of will still, so I don't know if my review is very helpful because I was kind of checked out. And also like this couple has been hinted at since the beginning, so I was really excited to finally get their romance. And then apparently because I wasn't done, I picked up another small town romance. This is part of the Sparrow Fall series by Catherine Cowles, and these are again just another book that I'm just like easy. I don't really have to think. They take no brain power. They're just like, I don't know, almost like just like a bit of a snack. I don't know how to explain it, but like some books are like meals and some books are snacks, and this book is a snack to me. Again, just like a perfect palette cleanser. And again, I was slumping. I just like could not pick up anything that I like really deeply wanted to be obsessed with. Like there are a few books on my TBR cart right now that I'm like, I know I'm gonna love that when I pick it up, but it's just like not the right time while I'm slumping. Like I just need to kind of read books that feel easy and familiar, so that is why I picked up this one. And this is the 4th book in the series. Yeah, 4th book in the series, and we are following Arden, who is like a very quiet, mysterious artist, and she has a lot of trauma, which like is a very consistent theme in this series. The series as a whole is about this family. It's kind of like a foster family. There's this mother who just like has brought all of these kids into her house. Some of them are like her biological kids, some of them she has like legally adopted, and some of them she's kind of just like brought in either as foster kids or just like as a found family type of thing. And all of them are grown up now. They're all in their 20s or 30s, and each book in the series is following a different kid or a different sibling from this family. And Arden was one of the siblings that I was most excited to read about because she just was the most mysterious. She's very quiet and very much like keeps to herself, and so being able to read about her story, and a lot of the kids kind of end up in this family because they've been through something really traumatic, and finding out what Arden has been through and kind of why she's a bit more mysterious and a bit more reserved is really heartbreaking. If you don't want to read about trauma, don't read this series, because all of these characters are so like trauma bonded together, and they all just have, it's crazy because it's set in a small town, and the amount of like bad things that happen in this small town is crazy. Like they need to up the security or something in this small town because so many things are happening. It's also a small town romance suspense book. So in all of Catherine Cow's books, she has like an element of suspense, an element of like crime. There's always like a bad guy. There's always something bad happening. So I really do like that in the way that it keeps it very interesting, because it's not just a romance. There's always like something else going on as well. So again, I enjoyed this. I thought it was good. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't like a favorite of all time, but I feel like it just did what it needed to do as a palate cleanser book. And at this point, I had been in a slump for like, I don't know, a week or something, maybe a little bit more. And I just felt like I needed to pick up something really different, because I was just like, I am not excited about anything that I'm picking up. I'm like enjoying the books that I'm picking up. They're like fine, but I still feel slumpy. So I just wanted to, I don't know, like do something about it. And I honestly think the best thing to do when you're in a slump is either just like read some palette cleansers, read some books that you don't like need to be 5 stars for you, or reread an old favorite. And I decided that I needed to reread something. I just didn't know what I wanted to reread. And so I was kind of just like staring at my bookshelves, and I was like, maybe I pick up Magnolia Parks, but I wasn't like quite in the mood for that. Part of me was like, do I just like restart Conditions of Will? But I was like, I think it's a little bit too soon to do that, and I'm scared that will just put me like back in the same slump that I was already in. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what I need to pick up. I need to pick up The Hunger Games. And so I did. I just need something to kind of like break up or like separate. I don't know how to explain it, but in my head I just needed something to break the chain almost, to just be like a bit of a gap. And this in my head was the perfect way to do that. And this was the perfect book to read in a slump. If you are someone who read The Hunger Games when you were younger and loved it, and you haven't reread it since, or maybe even if you have, but especially if you haven't reread it since, and you just like need a book to get excited about again, read this book. It was so good. I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did. I know that The Hunger Games was so impactful for so many people. Like I feel like so many people got into reading because of The Hunger Games, or it was just like such like a core memory for them, and that is definitely the case for me. I remember so vividly reading these books for the first time. I was in year 7. The year was 2011. I was like 12 turning 13 at the time, and I had a girl in my class who was a friend of mine who just tended to read really good books, and I read so many books through her. Like I just read her entire home library pretty much. Like I didn't own any of these books myself. I was just reading the books that belonged to her. Like she would read them, pass them on to me, I would read them, and then we'd be able to have this like very informal 2-person book club, and it was just the best. Like, and I still remember specifically when she handed me this book and she was like, I just finished this, you need to read it. It's part of a series. I don't even know if I'd really read many books that were in series at that point in time, apart from like Harry Potter maybe, I don't know, but like the idea of reading a series just felt very foreign to me. So she gave me the first one and I read it, and I remember going back to her and being like, what the heck, this was crazy. And then she read the second book, gave me the second book, and so on and so forth, and we were just geeking out over these books together. And it was just, yeah, it's just such a core memory for me. I also remember reading Catching Fire for the first time. It's the first time I've ever binged a book in like 1 to 2 sittings. I remember specifically it was a Saturday. I had just received Catching Fire from her, like she just handed it on to me. I had just finished the first book. I obviously wanted to start the second book. It was a Saturday morning. I had a beanbag in my room. It was black and it had pink flames on it, and I sat on that beanbag from the moment I pretty much woke up to the moment I went to sleep, and I read the entire second book in one sitting because I could not physically put it down. And I remember I went back to her and I was like, oh my gosh, I need the next book, and she hadn't finished Mockingjay yet, and so she couldn't give it to me, and it was like hell waiting for her to finish that book to be able to, you know, give it to me to read. And I just feel like this series changed my brain chemistry. Also, reading this as an adult, I'm like, why was I allowed to read this when I was like 12? There's just so much death, so much gore, so much sadness and pain in these books. And when you're 12, I don't think you should be reading that, but I feel like everyone read this when they were like 12. They are young adult books, I guess. Anyway, I read them in 2011 and I have not read them since. I have watched the first movie and the second movie, but I don't think I've ever watched Mockingjay Part 1 or 2. I also haven't read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes or Sunrise of the Reaping or anything like that. And I think I've seen the first and second movie maybe once or twice. Like, it's not something that, like, the movies are not something that I've like rewatched 100 times or anything like that. And so going back into this series was just such a crazy experience because there was so much, I don't want to say so much I forgot. I feel like the first two books felt very familiar to me. The third book, this one is the one that I had forgotten the most about, and so it was the most, like, I don't know how to explain it. The reading experience of this book was just so crazy because I like couldn't remember what was about to happen apart from like the really huge events or like the main things that happened or like the main deaths that happened. There were lots of like little moments that I had forgotten about, and even just like reading the series as an adult, you catch on to so many more things, or even just reading it knowing what happens at the end, there's so many more things to like take notice of. And I'm so excited to go into Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise of the Reaping now that I've reread these, and I think my reading experience of those books is going to be so much better now that I've reread these. But these were just the perfect thing to pick up in this slump because they made me so excited about reading again. It kind of just reminded me how much I loved reading and like kind of like where it all began. But these just hold such a special place in my heart, and I think I forgot how much I loved them until I read them, and also I forgot how sad they were. And I'm not gonna lie, did they leave me in a slump? Maybe, because I can't stop thinking about them. If you have been considering like, oh, maybe I want to do a Hunger Games reread, please do, because it was so much better than I thought it was going to be. I just didn't expect these books to like hold up, if that makes sense. Like, I thought I would recognize them as really good YA books and enjoy them in a reflective sort of way, but I think if I had read these even for the first time now, I would be just as obsessed as I was when I was 12 because they're just so well written. I think the plot is so perfect, and also this is like a series where every single book is so good. Every single book is necessary, and every single book flows so perfectly into the next one whilst remaining so harmonious, I guess you could say. Like, the main point is carried through the whole thing. It's so good. And like I said, I'm just really excited to read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise on the Reaping. I think they will destroy me, but I'm excited. And the last book that I finished this month was Heat of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is the third book in the Kindred Curse saga, and I have been reading this book for so long. I think I've been reading it for like 2 months, just like very slowly, but this is a thick book. This is the longest book I think I've read. Okay, on the Kindle it says it's over 1,000 pages. In this it says it's like 800. So this is one of the longest books I've read maybe since Kingdom of Ash. How long was Mistborn? I feel like that might have been like 700. Either way, this is just one of the longest books I've read in a while. It took me a long time to get through, but I really did enjoy it. I do still think the second book was probably my favorite. The second book was 5 stars for me. This one I think I'm gonna give 4.5. I only like just finished it, so it's a bit hard. But I think honestly one of my main criticisms is that it was just a little bit too long. I just think it could have been probably broken up into 2 separate books. There is so much that happens in this book, and I feel like the plot itself was really, really good. It felt like a slog. It felt really difficult to get through, so I'm hoping the next book isn't quite as long, because again, whilst it was really good and like I was really interested in everything happening, and the political side of things especially was fascinating, and like seeing DM really come into herself more and like figuring herself out more in this book was so interesting. I definitely was just like, oh my gosh, it just keeps going. Like, I just think it would have benefited maybe from being 2 separate books. But anyway, loved this. It was so good. There's not much I can say about what like happens in this book without it being a spoiler, so I'm not really gonna do that. But I think this is probably the best fantasy series I've read in a really long time that hasn't been a reread. This is really up there with like ACOTAR to me. Like, truly one of my favorite fantasy series ever. I will say though, it does feel so satisfying to be like, yes, I finished that. I read that book. I literally like just finished it by the end of the month. I did listen to some of it as an audiobook because it was just taking me so long to get through, especially whilst reading other books. But the audiobook was good too, so not mad at that. But those are all of the books that I read in April. Like I said, it was like this. Like I read some really great books and then I was slumping, and then I read the Hunger Games and it was up again, and it was a whole thing. So I'm hoping that May might be a little bit more stable for me. Hopefully my slump is over. I only finished reading Mockingjay yesterday, and then also Hated the Everflame yesterday. So I feel like I haven't had enough time to work out if I'm still in the slump or not. But I guess time will tell. So I would also love to hear what your favorite read of the month was. Let me know. And I guess I'll see you guys in my next video very soon. Goodbye.